It was a slow fade into what Jeff became at 27. I wasn't that at 15. Really at 15, I was just a kid, a good kid for the most part. You know, went to Catholic school, was like an altar boy, and then I had an event happen when I was about 14. I had worked really hard for this bike. Like in our neighborhood, the kids in my neighborhood who had the starter jackets or had the nice bikes, their parents were drug dealers. Like my stepdad and my mom worked hard just to, you know, just to keep us afloat. And we had nothing. So I remember when I was like 14, I worked real hard to get this bike. I got jumped for it and broke my jaw, you know, right the day before first day of high school. And so that was an event that I went to high school, and after being kind of socially, you know, cool in 8th grade, you go to high school with a wired shut jaw, and it just killed and I just remember such an anger and bitterness like being set in at that point that when I came back sophomore year, I had shaved my head with a razor, I had joined a gang, I had started dealing drugs. I just went off the deep end because it was just this like deep down, I'll never be that sucker again that works hard and, you know, all that stuff. So anyway, at 15, it started off very small, but as time went on, it was a slow fade into, you know, we're all born with a conscience that we know certain things are wrong. At 15, it might be cool to do what I know is wrong. But as time went on and my conscience numbed and it numbed and it numbed, you find yourself as a 25-year-old guy doing things that I never imagined as far as violence, as far as just the impact of the drugs that I was selling, the places I was selling, the people to which I was selling. And so I was pretty out there, man. I was about as radically opposite as you can be from the church or from Christ, you know what I mean? I was just far from God, even to the point, the degree when by 26 or 27, I was almost losing my mind, you know what I mean? It got to a point of like, you know, so frustrated with my life and with the fact that none of this stuff was working that I was just almost crazy, you know what I mean? When I was about 17, it went from you know, localized, small time selling to friends or selling, you know, to people at school. When I was about 17 years old, there was a guy that was selling drugs for me in one of the high schools. And I used to front him the drugs, and then he would sell it and he'd come back. And he came back one day and said someone robbed his locker, you know, he, you know, didn't have it. But his father was like the biggest bookie in Cleveland. And I remember he went to a party, got drunk, and badmouthed me and said, hey, you know, I took his stuff. And it was something that it really sparked me. And so at about 17 years old, his father had a door safe in the basement. And he always bragged there was like 60 grand down in the basement. And we never thought anything of it. He was a friend of mine. But when that happened, you know, I plotted on it and spent 3 days robbing that house. And so when I got 60 grand, when it was all said and done, I invested all that back into the business, and at 17 went from, you know, local to being able to purchase things that put me on a different plateau. That's really when it started to skyrocket. By the time I was 19, I moved to a suburb out in Willoughby, and started to really operate this thing. By 22, it had spread throughout the Midwest United States. It was in, you know, Michigan, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. It was, it really snowballed out of control at that point because it became something that consumed my whole life. It was like all day, every day, there's nothing else to think about if it's business all day, you know, or the partying that comes with that. It was really my persona, my identity was completely tied up in this business. And like I said, again, if you rewind it to a 15-year-old, it's just a kid wanting to be accepted, wanting people to like me, wanting the pretty girl, and I see the nice car gets the pretty girl, so I just want the nice car. And you know, but by that point, it was just out of control. It was like watching a movie of a guy living a life that, you know, I never imagined. That party lifestyle always has an emptiness beneath it. And publicly, people would say, wow, he has a dream life. This is what it's all about, ain't it, Jeff? High-fiving in the bars and everything looks good, but I'd go home to this beautiful house in the suburbs and I would be drinking myself to sleep in the basement. I would be depressed. I would be, you know, and so inside I knew, like, why doesn't this work? Like, I've achieved everything I want out of life. If it's empty up here, like, what are we doing? What's the point? What's the next echelon that I can get to? Like, and so inside I just knew that something was missing, you know what I mean? Right around that same time, by that point we had storage houses throughout this community where we would store product. and then we would run the business through those stores. One of those was ran by my best friend, and his name was Jerry. And basically, one day he called me and just said, "Hey Jeff, I need to talk to you today. Like, not about business, not about whatever. I'm going through something that's pretty real." And like I said, at that point, if it wasn't business, I just didn't hear people. It was everything I was. And so I blew him off. I even insulted him, just said, "Look, I don't have time for that. Like, when you want to talk like a man, call me back." And all day long, he kept calling me and saying, "Jeff, you don't understand, bro. I'm not going to share this with anybody else, and I need to talk to you." And I was, busy. It was like a weekend day, and I just said, "Dude, I'll get there when I get there." And I just kept running and running and running. So the day goes on. His father calls me at like 11 o'clock at night. His dad lives out on the lake. And he just says, "Hey Jeff, Jerry's driving around the block in his truck right now, and every time he passes the house, he's screaming something crazy, and he says that to get you here." And at that point, I was in the neighborhood, and I said, "I'm busy right now. I'll get there when I get there." And I waited about an hour and a half, and then I finally did. I drove out there, and it was pouring rain as I'm driving out there, and when I got there about 2 minutes after my best friend had driven his truck off of a cliff and killed himself. And so as I arrived to the scene, his father's running down the hill, like trying to save his son out of a car. The car's just bobbing up and down in the lake, and it's pouring rain, and I'm just standing on the edge of this cliff, like, kind of replaying in my mind how the day went and how many stiff arms I had given this man. And it was just a moment in my life with all the questions about why doesn't this work, and why, it was just a moment where for the first time the veil was definitively torn. Like, okay, the world's way of life just doesn't work, because here I stand with everything that Tupac told me to go get. I stand with everything I ever dreamed of having, and I stand here as the type of man who would utterly turn his back on a friend that needs him. Or I had a 2-year-old little boy at the time, and I was throwing money at him, but no kind of fatherhood. And I said, this isn't the good life at all. And so that was a day that things kind of hit the wall. And I went home that day and just said, I remember I went home, closed the door to my office, and I wrote a poem, which was really always my medium for like breaking out of my box a little bit. It was kind of how I expressed myself, the shame, the guilt. If you read any of my old stuff, it's always like that sort of stuff. But anyway, I wrote a poem called A Plea for Rebirth, where I basically just said, God, I grew up in Catholic church. I've seen religion. I've seen the people who claim to know you. I've seen and heard the story, you know what I mean? But if you exist beyond all of the hollow things that I've seen, like if there is a real God out there who actually cares about his creation, which would be me, like, show up, man. Because at this point, I don't want to keep living this life. I've seen that it's empty, and here I am, like broken and messed up and twisted and addicted and everything under the sun. Just show up in my life. And so that was the definitive night, I think, that I cried out for it was the first time I kind of said, okay, maybe I don't have this life altogether. The roller coaster ride started to go down, like right from the very next day. Before I really even knew what had happened, police had closed in on my operation, which I thought to be impenetrable. I spent my whole life building it in such a way that they would never get it. And they closed in, they nailed me hard, and I was in prison facing up to 7 years in prison. And so that was really when, the brick wall would be that, facing of that prison sentence, you know what I mean? So, and even when I got there, I was still so just enchanted by the deceptions of the world. When I was in there, again, buying into the fact, hey, this is what I'm good at. This is what clicks for me. When I get home, I'll buy this, and I'll make it into that, and I'll make it into that, and it'll be okay, and the people will esteem me again, and people, but when I got there, someone had donated a box of books to the jail. And even as I'm plotting this, rebirth or whatever it would be, I went over to this box of books, and in it was like 15 books, mostly, romance novels with like Fabio on the cover and Danielle Steele as the author, but there was in it one old beat up Bible. And really just out of, You know, I was in jail. That's what people do. Maybe I'll get some positive reinforcement. Maybe I'll, you know, I took this Bible out and just took it back to my bunk. And then every night when it was down, you know, you got to go back to your bunk, it's kind of lockdown time, I would just turn to it and I would just start to read, and I would do stuff, you know, probably theologically aren't even really supposed to do. Like I would say, okay, God, you got something to say to me? Show me. And it would open to like Jeremiah, talking about, hey, I'm a tree planted next to a spring, and no matter what happens to the leaves out here, my life comes from within. And I would say, man, like I wish I could have that, because the weather's pretty dark around my tree. I would open it again and be Jesus answering the question of how to get that. Like, you know, anyone who believes in me, rivers of living water. And it was just like, it was just very intriguing. I surely wasn't all in at that point. I was just intrigued that this book, which was written so long ago, could possibly speak to where I was at right at that moment. There was, every night, it was a God moment of like, here I am, or the deceptions that I had bought into in life and what the world had sold me. And so the process just kind of kept carrying. There was so much pride, so much self-centeredness, so much stuff to dig through. But for about a month and a half, God just kind of kept, you know, chipping away at my heart. And then about 3 o'clock in the morning one night, I came to John 15. And I had been reading John through that day, so it was already pretty, you know, powerful stuff, obviously. But at about 3 in the morning, I came to John 15, and Jesus, you know, hit the home run. For me, at least, he said, you know, I'm the vine in this world. You're all branches. Apart from me, you can't do anything. But if you plug into me, I'll bear fruit in your life, fruit that lasts. And it was probably the realest thing I had ever heard anyone say, because that was my life. Like, I plugged into cars, and it's like you get this new car, and then, you know, at the end of the day, a month later, the new model comes out, and now I really wish I had the new model, and oh man, the interior's not as nice. I plug into this relationship, and it was just this fleeting pleasure, and there's nothing there other than that, and then it would just die out and wither, and it would just... I plug into money, into things, into anything the world had to give me, but it was always fruit that would just die. It was temporal pleasure. And so that at the end of the day, I'm drinking myself to sleep in a mansion, you know what I mean? Because none of it lasts. And so the fact that this man said, look, if you plug into me, I'll bear fruit in your life that lasts. I said, wow. And it was really a moment in my mind also that I rewinded back through what had just occurred over the past year of my life, you know, back to the office where I said, God, if you exist beyond all of this stuff, like, show up, you know what I mean? And at that point, at that moment, it was obvious to me that it would have took more faith for me to get up off of that bunk and go back to the world and just say, than for me to just say, this is what it is. Like, this man really met me where I was at and walked this journey with me to this bunk, to this moment, to this time. And I said, God, you know, I don't really have much to offer at this point, and this gospel is very different than the one I heard growing up. Like, you're talking about die, and you'll show me how to live. Like, let go completely of everything I ever knew, and you'll show me what life's all about. And so here I am. You know, all I own is shower shoes, but I'll give you everything I got from this point out, like as if I die on this bunk. You know what I mean? Like, just carry my corpse through this life and show me what it's all about. Give me that abundant life that you're talking about, man. It was ex-customers, it was ex-partners, so there was an obvious question right on the table, like, dude, what happened? You know what I mean? So yeah, you're right, absolutely. We just kind of came here just to love our neighborhood. I feel like, you know, I had spent a decade delivering polluted water to the people in my community, door to door to door to door to door, knowing they have to call me in 2 days. And God had opened a door for me to come back with living water and say, look, you guys know me. It's not the preacher guy at your front door. You guys know me. I have living water where one drink and it's over. Like, everything that ails your home, everything that ails our community, it's in my pocket. I mean, I have it. If you have questions about it, if you doubt it, we can have that conversation. Whatever it looks like for you as an individual, I have living water where one drink, you don't have to call me in 2 days. You know what I mean? He'll cure everything that ails you.